Welcome. Oops. The March 26, 2024 regular meeting of the Everett Public Schools Board of Directors is hereby called to order. We'll begin with the section 2.0, the land acknowledgement. Student Representative Gilbertson.
We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Coasalish, Snohomish, and Tulalip people. We express our deepest respect and gratitude to the ancestors of this land and whose shoulders we stand on. In Everett Public Schools, we strive to create equitable outcomes and build a culture of inclusive belonging for all students, teachers, and staff and community.
Thank you. Will you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
President Mitchell.
Present.
Vice President Herman.
Present.
Director Atkins.
Present.
Director Mason.
Present.
Director Revelinsky.
Present.
Student Representative Gilbertson.
Present.
Student Representative Kink.
Present.
Thank you. Now, section 5.0, adoption of the agenda. Dr. Saltzman, have there been any changes to the agenda after it was published?
Yes, Madam Chair, there's been one change to the agenda. Item 7.01, the superintendent's report presentation was added. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any objection to the meeting agenda being adopted by general consent? Seeing none, the agenda is adopted by general consent. Section 6.0, recognitions. I'm sad to say there are none for this meeting, but we will definitely have more as the spring goes on. Now, section 7.0, superintendent's report. Dr. Saltzman.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, Board of Directors, and to the public this evening. Welcome.
Sorry.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to tell our public about multicultural nights that we're having in our schools. All schools are hosting family events or assemblies celebrating and educating our school communities about the diverse cultures and traditions that we have amongst us in Everett. It's a wonderful time to learn more about each other with music, dances, food, and more. These events will allow schools to foster and sustain a diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment where students can thrive and succeed. Thank you to our natural leaders, our PTSAs, school staff, DEI team for the amazing multicultural events showing diversity in our schools, and we're quite proud of that. Wow, what an event that I attended last Saturday. We had the Math Fest held at Cascade High School, and it was over 500 participants of adults, kids. Our kids that were there were ages 3 to 8, and it was a math adventure. That's really what it was. Cafeteria was packed with math games, activities for hours for families to get together and to collaborate as a community. Kudos to our co-sponsors, Zeno, and our Pastagram, which from the Puget Sound Taxpayer Accountability Account, for partially funding this event. And especially I would like to call out Director Ann Arnold and her P5 team, her entire team, with the many volunteers who came and made this just a joyous event. What a great place to be on Saturday doing math events and being amongst our community. I want to thank everybody, because guess what's coming up next week when we're off, but we'll still honor our amazing assistant principals. It'll be Assistant Principal Week, and we're going to celebrate them the following week when we return from a well-rested break, from spring break, as we come back, and we're going to honor our assistant principals. Thank you for all that you do, and many might call them assistant principals. We also call them associate principals. They work so hard, and they are partners with the work with their principals. They are our leadership teams. Wow, has the year gone quick. Next week is spring break, and our school district will be closed. Our schools will be closed. I hope everyone has a wonderful time with family and friends as you refresh and enjoy the beautiful weather that is here in Everett and in our area in the Pacific Northwest. And I'm just excited that everybody gets to spend time with family and friends for that week. So thank you, Madam Chair and Board of Directors.
You. So now section 8.0, board comments. Director Herman, would you like us to begin?
Sure. These past 2 weeks since our last board meeting, I've been thinking about how they really have highlighted one of our core values of collaboration. I had several opportunities to get out to some events, one being over to the Edmonds School District. We were able to view their ribbon cutting of this school-based health center over at Montlake Terrace High School. And so I just want to thank them and all the people from the Snohomish County Community Health Center that are working with us to see how best we could collaborate and partner to bring that service into 2 of our high schools. I also had the opportunity to attend the State of the City address from Everett Mayor Cassie Franklin at the Everett Mall last week. And it's exciting to hear plans for development and talk with some of our partners about our shared goals. We are very intertwined in working towards improving our communities. So that was a fun event. Last Friday, I had the chance to attend the encore performance of the Everett Public Schools Foundation's movie Sammy as part of their annual benefit. And what a fantastic job they did on that. A terrific movie. It really highlights the vital impact that our foundation has in our schools and for our students throughout the year. So if anyone is listening and is not familiar with the foundation, I urge you to visit their website. And then also a very big thank you to the Everett Special Education PTSA for their annual Run, Walk, and Roll event at the Everett Memorial Stadium this past Sunday. The sun was out in the afternoon. The mascot races are always a hit. It was a great time to have our 27 PTAs and the Bruin Community Parent Group for them to have a chance to visit with one another, share ideas. It's such a positive event for a great cause. So a lot of collaboration going on. It was really wonderful to see.
You.
Yeah, I don't have too much to share. I also attended the State of the City address and was really excited just to hear about some of the future plans for Everett. I also attended the Public Schools Foundation event and was just really fascinating to hear some of the work that they do, as well as to see their Sammy movie production. And then Director Herman and I got the chance, it was yesterday, right? Yeah, yesterday to go and tour the Lively Environmental Center, and that was a really wonderful experience, and was just really happy to get to see some of the amazing opportunities our kids have for engaging in environmental science.
Director Mason?
Thank you. Yeah, I miss visiting Lively Center back when my kids were little and planting seeds with them. I don't have much to say, actually, so I'll pass, but I just want to wish everyone a happy spring. I love days like today. A little rain, but a little sunshine. It's nice to see all the little flowers coming up and just sort of that moment of hope that the weather's turning.
Director Rovolinski?
I did a little bit of work in the district. I visited some schools. I also went to the Everett State of the City. I went to Sammy. I thought they were wonderful. I really, really liked Math Fest. I was just blown away by how popular, how diverse it was, the different events and kind of challenges that the kids got to do and experience. I was just blown away. I thought it was great. And I just, I feel really positive that it's only going to get better. So, yeah, thanks.
You.
There has been a lot of excitement around school for spring break coming up. I know everyone's excited for that. March feels like one of the longest months out of everything. Graduation is right around the corner, and I know it's been urged at our schools to get the cap and gowns as soon as possible. I got the opportunity to speak at the Rotary Student of the Month meeting, where I got to talk about what Interact Club at Everett High has been up to and all that. And we have our big egg hunt coming up on Thursday, where students will be able to find eggs around the school and they have little affirmations in them, and then they can bring them in for some candy. And then our spring prep assembly, I'm pretty sure is this Friday, where the teachers get handed Golden Apple Awards, where students vote for some of their favorite teachers, and we just get to recognize them. And then, as well as I wanted to recognize the students that have been taking time out of their Tuesdays to go down to Garfield Elementary and help tutor some of the students down there that need extra help. So, yeah.
A great report, thank you. Director King? Student Representative King.
Like Alice said, March has been a really brutal month, and students are really looking forward to spring break. I feel like it's been a pretty fast year, though, and after this, it's one more quick stretch, and then we have AP tests in May, and after that, the school year is almost already done, so it's been a quick ride. However, recently at the high school, a lot of our competition clubs have been working hard to meet their state competition goals. We have a technology club, a business club, and medicine club, and all those clubs are sending members to national competitions later in the year. So I'm really happy with how those clubs performed, and I'm really happy to see how well they do in nationals. So yeah.
Thank you so much. I will also agree with Director Mason, because when my daughter was here 2 weeks ago for spring break, when we had that little false spring, it was just lovely to be outside. But unfortunately, the rabbits have destroyed all my tulips and daffodils, and I cannot figure out how to do it, but I figure it's circle of life. But I really did enjoy with Director Herman and some of the other district leadership to go to Mount Lake Terrace High School to look at their new opening of the health center. And really, like she said, look forward to seeing what we can do here for our students through the community partnerships that they have and the money we're getting from the state. But I also learned a lot about, and speaking to the nurse practitioner that is there, about really how they work within the state laws when it comes to student rights, as well as some of the federal laws, because they're a federal agency. So that was really interesting to learn, just because as a healthcare provider, sort of some of their healthcare rules, but just really looking forward to that. So thank you. And now, making sure, that moves us on to public comment. Dr. Saltzman, are there any requests for public comment tonight?
Madam Chair, I believe there's an online public comment.
All right, Jared not here? Okay, thank you. Then, section 10.0 legislative updates. Director Herman.
Okay, this is actually really quick tonight. This is the stage of the legislative process where the governor is signing the bills that have passed through. And so that's what's been happening these last few weeks. We have heard of no surprises that we're expecting, so that's just continuing along. And then, as you saw in the materials for today, we will be hearing an update from our Executive Director of Finance and Business Services, Ms. Tress, which will include some of the impact from the legislative session, so some of those numbers. So no other legislative updates for me for now.
Yeah, I did edit out, Director Herman, because last time, you have a lot of updates, so today it was just very simple. All right. Speeding along here, thank you. Section 11.0, the consent agenda. Dr. Saltzman, have you received any questions about the consent agenda, a consent agenda item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In this case of the consent agenda, we did not receive any questions regarding the consent agenda.
Thank you so much. First, does any director wish to remove an item from the consent agenda and place it in new business? Okay. Now, is there any objection to adopting the consent agenda by general consent? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved by general consent. We will now move on to section 12.0, strategic progress monitoring. We have 2 items tonight. First is the iReady diagnostic winter results. Dr. Woods, you're introducing this?
I am, as soon as I find it. Perfect. Thank you. Good evening, President Mitchell, members of the school board, student representatives, Dr. Saltzman, and members of the public. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. We are very excited to share the iReady winter diagnostic results. As you likely know, our students in grades kindergarten through 8th grade take the iReady diagnostic assessment in reading and mathematics up to 3 times per year, fall, winter, and spring. And today we're going to present the results from the winter diagnostic. We'll be specifically looking at growth of student performance from fall to winter, how our district results compare with the results from across the state and across national norms. We'll look at our student progress toward achieving typical annual growth and what you would, so typical annual growth would be what you'd expect a student to gain in the course of a full school year. And so you'll see what they gained in a half a year. And also look at what they've achieved towards achieving their stretch goals, which are a much more ambitious goal. And there'll be an explanation of what achieving those goals mean for our students. We'll look at overall growth and performance. We'll look at the improvement of placement level as one measure of growth. And we'll look at the instructional use of iReady in our elementary schools. And then we have two principals here with us today. Monique Bean from Forest View Elementary and Steve Hopkins from Jefferson Elementary, who will share how they use the information from these iReady diagnostics, and they use both growth and performance with their staff to move from analyzing the data to specific action that teams and individual teachers make in their instruction to improve student learning and to close gaps. So we're going to start with Dr. Matthews.
All right, we're going to start with our performance relative to the national norms, the state year-to-date, and the national year-to-date. So on the left here, we have the math iReady diagnostic for winter. At the top of this chart in the darker green are students who are mid to above that in performance. The lighter green is early on grade level, the yellow 1 grade level below, and then the lighter red 2 grade levels below, and the darker red 3 or more grade levels below. So our district at the winter is at 46% of our students early to above grade level. And you will notice that that is a higher performance than the national norm, the national year-to-date, or the Washington State year-to-date by, in the case of the national in Washington, 10 or 12 percentage points. I would note that the national norming was done in 2019 pre-pandemic and is scheduled for norming next year. So that we beat that norm is actually quite good. On the right side here, we see the same data for reading in the winter, and we are at 56% early to above grade level. Again, higher performance than the national norm, national year-to-date, or Washington year-to-date, and even a greater gap between them, so our performance higher there as well. Just going to hide these. So next, we're going to look at the performance fall to winter, and this is the matched cohort. So these are only students who were with us in the fall and then also in the winter. So of course, we always want to see increased performance over time. But sometimes we miss students who have made significant growth because they have not yet reached grade level. So we want to highlight here students who improved by full grade levels by mid-year. So in the case of reading, 521 students went from 1 or more grade levels below in the fall to mid or above grade level in the spring. So in essence, they not only caught up, but met standard. 1,270 students more went from 1 or more grade levels below to early on grade level. So mid-grade level means you've met the vast majority of the standards of your grade level. So though these students are early on grade level, midway through the year, they're still in a very good position. When we dissect the students who made gains of 1 or more grade levels mid-year, so in the first semester, if we break those down by where they were in the fall relatively, we see that students who started 3 or more grade levels below in the fall, 49% of those students have already grown one or more grade levels by the end of the first semester. Students who were 2 grade levels below in the fall, 55% of those students have grown a full grade level or more by mid-year, and students who were 1 grade level below in the fall, 46% of those students have already grown an entire grade level by January. So here's the breakdown of performance by grade level, and this line here represents 50%. So you can see, with the exception of grade 6, all of our grades are above 50%. So half or more students have already achieved early on grade level or above halfway through the year. When we compare the matched cohort by grade level, you see that every one of the grade levels K through 5, and in fact 6 through 8, have all improved in terms of the percentage of students who are early to above grade level. I will say that the kindergartners in the fall, not all kindergartners participate. It's actually an optional participation, and that's because they're engaged in Walk Kids and many other assessments as they enter our system. This is reading already fall to winter. This is also the matched cohort in grades 6 through 8, though a smaller percentage of increase. We did see increases at each grade level. And then this is our reading diagnostic broken down by our ethnic and racial groups, as well as our program participation. So students with disabilities, multilingual learners would be included in those programs. And you can see that for our Asian, white, and 2 or more races, they have exceeded that 50% mark. And in addition, our American Indian, Alaska Native, our Black and African American students are approaching that 50% mark. So moving on to math, looking at fall to winter. So this is all students. This is not the matched cohort. We saw 566 students who went from 1 or more grade levels below all the way to mid or above grade level by the winter diagnostic. Another 1,476 students went from 1 or more grade levels below to early on grade level at the semester mark. And then similar to reading, and in some cases a larger percentage, we saw that we had quite a few students who made 1 or more grade level gains broken down by their fall relative placement. So for our students who were 3 or more grade levels below in the fall in math, 55% of those students gained 1 or more grade levels in a semester. For our students who are 2 grade levels below, 58% of those students gained 1 or more grade levels by mid-year. And our students who are 1 grade level below, 39% of them made a full grade level or more gain. And we do in fact see students jump multiple grade levels in a semester. All right, so this is the breakdown of our already winter diagnostic performance by grade level. Here's our 50% mark. Grades 4 and 5 exceeding that already. Grades K through 3 and 6 approaching it very closely, with 7 and 8 just behind them. And when we look at the matched cohort from fall to winter in math, as we did with reading, we see substantial gains in early to mid on grade level for grades K through 5, and then increases, in fact, larger increases than in reading and math for grades 6 through 8. When we break down our iReady scores by race or ethnicity and program, here's our 50% mark. And in this case, we see our Asian students have exceeded that 50% halfway through the year. White or 2 or more races are approaching with, again, our Black or African American, American Indian, or Alaska Native, all just behind that. Keep in mind, this is halfway through the school year, so there's a lot of learning time left, and we expect these to increase in the next semester. So Dr. Woods mentioned typical and stretch growth, and I have talked about this before, but I want to just review what they mean, because these numbers can be a bit confusing when we look at them. So typical growth is the amount of growth based on iReady's research that we expect a student to gain in a year, depending on their grade level and their starting placement level. So here we have two students, and you'll see that they don't have the same typical growth goal, and that's because they're starting in different places. The student who is early on grade level at the beginning of the year, their typical growth is actually less than a student who is farther behind. The stretch growth goal is a more ambitious goal that, if met one or more times, will accelerate that student to get them to grade level. And again, they're not the same numbers. So for our student Alex here, he has a larger stretch growth goal because he's farther behind. He needs to get more gain and potentially more often to get to standard. So we see students who make more than 100% of their stretch growth. So for example, Alex here, if he earned 27 points, he'd be at 100% of his typical growth. But if he got 33, then we'd say he's at 120%. We actually had a student who made 315% of their growth, so that was pretty cool. If we look at the stretch growth for this student, 100% is that 43 points. If this student got to 65, then we would say they've met 150% of their stretch growth. Again, that's an ambitious goal, so exceeding 100 is a big deal, but you need to meet it more than once to get caught up if you are significantly behind. All right, so when we report where we're at collectively around growth, we talk about the median growth goal. So we look at all the students that are in a class, grade level, a student group, and we line up the percent of their growth. So you see over here on the far right side, a student who's 120, that means 120% of their growth goal. And then we look for that median student, because that tells us that half of the students in that class have a greater amount of growth, have achieved a greater amount of growth. So we want that always edging up over that 50%, that's where we're headed halfway through the year. So when we look at grade levels, for example, we're looking at not just their growth, but also their performance. And in this case, we look at their performance relative to the national norm. So here's our median typical growth at 50%. We're halfway through the year. We want to see our grade levels above that mark. And here is the national norm of the 50th percentile. So you can see that every one of our grade levels is in the high performance, high growth category. And in fact, there's the 100% typical growth. We have some where the median is approaching 100%. That means half the students in that class have actually achieved more than 100% of their typical growth. So our highest performance in terms of typical growth was the 92nd, or 92% of typical growth in the grade 4, and also grade 4 had the highest performance at the 68th percentile against the national norms. There he is right there. For math, similar, here's our 50% of typical growth, all but 2 grade levels above that mark already. Here's our 50th percentile against the national norm. So with the exception of grades 6 and 7, all of our grade levels were in high performance, high growth. 6 and 7 are in the high performance, low growth category. The highest performance, grade 1 and 4 at the 59th percentile, and grade 1 at the 69th percent of typical growth for highest growth. When we look at this by grade level and by relative performance, remember we're kind of aiming at that 50%. In blue, you're seeing the median progress toward typical growth. So right here in fourth grade, in reading, you see this 92%. What that means is that in the fourth grade, 50% of students halfway through the year have already achieved 92% of their typical growth. A full 50% of those students. In the red, we see that more ambitious stretch growth goal. We have several grade levels approaching that, a couple over it as well. Remember, at halfway through the year, we want students to be at that 50% mark. And then if we break it down by where students started in the beginning of the year, so we have our students by their placement in the beginning of the year. And notice that for typical growth, we have a higher percentage, we have median at a higher percentage of the typical growth for those students who are farther behind, which is what we want to see. If students are 3 grade levels behind, we want that growth to be as high as it can be. If you reach 88% halfway through the year, our hope would be to reach twice that by the end of the year. Similarly, we want those stretch growth, the median stretch growth to be approaching 50, as we see here with the 1 grade level behind. Keeping in mind that those numbers, that amount of stretch growth is substantial the farther a student is behind. And then this is the same information for our students in math. In dark blue, you see the progress toward typical growth. In orange, progress toward stretch growth. And with the exception of 2 of our grade levels, all of the other grade levels are above that 50% mark, and K through 4 are very close to achieving that at the median. We see the same pattern for math with students that are farther behind achieving a median of a greater percentage of their typical growth. So those students who are 3 or more grade levels below, the median at 70%, certainly where we want those students to be to catch up over the course of 1 or more years. And now I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Bean.
Thank you. I want to thank the board, Dr. Salzman, for having me come here and just share a little bit about Forest View. So at Forest View, we are intentional about aligning our systems, our school improvement plan, our action items with the work that we're doing, and really taking advantage of the most time that we can with staff. This is carried out through our ALIF, our Learning Improvement Fridays, and it's also during our power teams. Our power teams are really our PLCs. PLCs had a negative kind of cloud over it, so we call them power teams. And I'm fortunate that I was able to build time within our school day where I can bring grade level teams together we take time together to plan and do those things throughout the school day. And then, of course, our staff meetings. And so we're using every opportunity that we have to continue and push the work that we're doing at Forest View. Using iReady data from the iReady Winter Diagnostics, we plan to analyze student growth and also dig deeper into teachers really understanding the strengths their students had, as well as the areas that they needed to grow. And I'm going to take you through an example of how we structure the work that we do. So you see here we have the iReady Diagnostics growth. Using our guiding questions that we presented to our staff, we started with iReady student growth data to analyze the growth students made towards their annual typical student growth. At this time of the year, as you heard Dr. Matthews say, talk about the year, students should be at 50% of their typical growth. This is a snapshot here of a class and then drilling down to what it would look like for a student. As you can see, we wanted teachers to identify which students were on track and which students did not meet that goal at this time. Once we took teachers through that, we had them pull out the essential standards and that were taught during the first semester, and then compare them to the Common Core State Standard Performance Report. So the performance report, what it does is it gives us information on the standards students have mastered or did not master, and which skills need to be addressed. And if you look at the slides, you'll see a green check. That is where students likely understand the skills, all the way down to the X where students likely do not have sufficient understanding of any of the skills. And this report gives the number of students, and if you click on that number, it will tell you the students that have by name mastered and the students that haven't. So it really gives the teachers really good information about what they've taught and what students have learned and what they need to do for those next steps. And the guiding questions that we had the teachers go through those as they went through this work. So we took that information and what we did that we gathered and we used exit slip, which we do at our A-lifts and time that we come together so we can get feedback. And we took that to our instructional leadership team, and their job is to plan the next steps, which included grade level discussions that were going to take place, planning during PLC or our power team's time, plan for differentiation around skills that needed to be addressed as a whole class, and also small group, and also individual re-engagement time. And so preparing our leadership team to do that work, to be that voice, to guide their team is essential in that, and everyone taking a part in that ownership and being able to come together for that work. So that is what we're doing. We are working to really close those gaps, to address what our kids need, to provide professional development, to provide support to our staff. I want to thank Larry for coming out. He happened to come out and capture some pictures of the work that we were doing together. I do want to say that if you have noticed me in one of those pictures, I'm committed to never wearing that outfit again. And truly.
Back up the slides so we can see it?
Excuse me?
You back up the slides so we can see it?
Oh, no, please. It was not pretty. I want to introduce my colleague, Stephen Hopkins, from Jefferson Elementary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Board, Dr. Saltzman. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and share a little bit about what's happening at Jefferson. I think that you'll see a lot of similarities to the work that's happening at Forest View. And I wanted to start by building on a comment that she shared about the critical piece that our leadership teams, our school leadership teams play. And you'll see that as I share a little bit here. What we did at Jefferson is we took what we called the quadrants approach. And so you saw in Dr. Matthews' slides a little while ago of taking a look at the growth and achievement. And we started as a leadership team by looking at our grade levels and just seeing which quadrant each grade level fell into in math and in reading. So obviously we want to be above that horizontal high growth and seeing that progress. So very similar to what was shared, we're looking at 50% of that typical growth at the midpoint of the school year. So we began by just looking at where are our grade levels in these quadrants. And then from there, we took it to our instructional leadership team, to our PLCs, to our teachers, all the way down to individual students. And again, I want to reiterate what was shared about the critical piece of our instructional leadership teams. It could be very easy for myself and my instructional coach to call the teachers together and lead the analysis of the data and guide them through next steps. But it's so much more impactful when we empower and equip our leadership team members to take the work to their grade level PLCs. And so what we did at one of our instructional leadership team meetings in February, after all of the diagnostic results were in, is we had each of our leadership team members take their classroom, because most of our leadership team members are classroom teachers as well, and we had them plot each of their students on the quadrant, and to just take that time and look at how is each individual student doing, and to start the analysis there. And from there, some wonderful conversations and brainstorming began. We took a look at some trends. Similar to the data that was shared district-wide, we noticed that there's still some gaps that we are needing to close with our multilingual learners, our students with disabilities. And so we viewed it as, let's first get our students plotted, and then let's talk about our action steps. And so we engaged in that exercise, and some great discussion happened around what are some things we could do class-wide with our Tier 1 instruction. How could we be tweaking our intervention efforts, our flexible and targeted intervention? And then how could we further use the iReady tool? How could we be setting those individual instructional pathways that would really hit the sweet spot for students on what they need to work on? So it was a great discussion, but we weren't done yet. Now I said to my leadership team, I want you to do just what we've done here, and I want you to take it to your PLCs. And similar to Forest View, we have the good fortune of having PLC time built into our school day on Fridays. A power team, we call it high-performing teams, and it's time to engage in that critical work. So our instructional team members were equipped and charged with the task of going to their PLCs and doing the exact same activity, plotting your students on the quadrants, doing some analysis, and then planning for action. And again, I feel like that is a much more sustainable model. It's building and equipping our leadership team members and each of our teachers to own the work at a deeper level. And so again, some of the work that came out of that was our PLCs coming together and saying, you know what, the data's showing that we could really target some Tier 1 instruction strategies. We could make some tweaks to our intervention. And then kind of a common theme that was running throughout the analysis is, how do we replicate and expand those students that are showing high growth? Even if they're not yet at standard, they are showing that high growth. How do we keep that going, and how do we even accelerate that? So that was a guiding question. And just a quick example, our third grade team, our essential work of ensuring third grade literacy. Our third grade team did some great analysis and had some great discussions and action planning around some comprehension strategies that they wanted to emphasize both in their Tier 1 instruction and in their small group and targeted and flexible intervention groups. So it's been a really valuable exercise at Jefferson. I feel like it's built the capacity of our teachers to just further own the work, own the urgency of accelerating and moving student achievement forward. So I just want to again say thank you for the opportunity to be here and share a little bit of the work that we're doing at Jefferson. Thank you.
Thank you, both of the principals. I love that we're able to share the data and analyze that and have some real depth around that, and then be able to hear from the principals, what does it look like when we then take it back to the teams and the schools, and what does that work look like in the schools? So I appreciate their focus on closing gaps and accelerating learning for all students. And really grounding that in the data and building the capacity of their teams. So thank you to both of you. And I want to let you know, we could have chosen any number of principals. These are 2 examples. There are many, many examples across our district. So I want to thank you for representing your colleagues. Now is the time that we are here to hear your feedback, hear your comments, and answer questions that you might have.
First, I want to apologize for the disruption that might have been up here, if you noticed it, because board docs went down for us and we like to follow the slides. So I want to thank Jared and potentially Brian for helping us get it back. So thank you. I apologize. Any questions or comments?
Thank you for the great presentation, and thank you to the principals for taking time out to come. I think what you did for me is we get the data at a district-wide level, and it's really, really helpful because how we turn the needle for the district is what you're doing at the schools. So that's just fantastic. Parent-teacher conferences and how important it is to engage parents and families in this work. It got me thinking, is there a standard, how is the information shared back to parents in helping in this work?
Do either of you want to take that?
There is a parent report in iReady that is generated that typically, at least at Jefferson, we share with the families. So it gives families an indication of where their student is in terms of the diagnostic, and it also gives some guidance on some next steps that the student can be taking.
And Forest View, we are doing the same thing. We're going into, our teachers going and print the report so they can have that conversation and show the parent where they are in iReady. It might be how many lessons they have done or their success rate. So the parent has a visual idea of what it looks like, because we do encourage parents, if they can, to have those students to get on for those lessons.
Perfect, thanks. I'm excited to see the spring data because there's a lot of great progress being made. My other question might be, maybe you could, one thing came to mind, looking at the matched cohorts, do we have mobility data for the schools? It was just triggering in my mind how important it is that we're able to sort of track, if we have our students that are going through, is that something that?
We don't have a specific mobility number. I will say that, the vast majority of students were in both data sets is very high.
Okay, in general, I didn't see it on report cards, and it
Yeah.
just made me think of that concept. So, thank you.
Well, first, I just want to call out the percentage increase in the math and how strong it is when I'm used to seeing such big numbers in reading and not so much math. So I'm hoping that maybe the middle school schedule redesign and the elementary curriculum is contributing to that. Would you concur or add to that?
I would say yes, and we have also really in all of our work all year, and our principals can probably attest to this, we've said our focus is our multilingual students, our students with disabilities, and math. We need to really focus on those. So there has been a very intentional focus on math, as well as the redesign, as well as really good implementation of the illustrative math curriculum at the elementary schools.
Yeah, that's great. Good work. And then also, I was just curious, I guess, well, first, I want to thank Principal Hopkins and Bean for being here and taking your time to come present to us. I really appreciate that. But we didn't have a middle school principal here tonight. Would we hear the same thing? Because I think a wondering or question I may have is, what happens when those kids go to middle school? Because the numbers dramatically change, like in just 1 year.
Thank you for asking that question. I think we would have something a little bit different from the middle school principals, because this is the 7th or 8th year of implementation in the elementary schools and the 2nd in middle school.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of we've got to make sure that we get that implemented well. They, they are strengthening their use of the reports like the Common Core State Standards report that these principals talked about, and they're using those with the middle school staff. It is new for them. And we've got a few other things as well. For example, if you see the spring 5th grade last year data, and then you see 6th grade fall data, and it's significantly lower in some students, it could be that we need to do a better job of really analyzing that in the fall and pulling the students and saying, you didn't lose that much math in the summer. Let's redo that, and let's double down on really showing what you know so that we can make the right interventions and not try to intervene everywhere, because you really have more than that. And so I think we will see more growth as we get more strategic about analyzing that, and planning instruction and interventions, and then using the tools that we have in iReady. We don't have that personalized instructional plan at the middle school, but we have many of the other tools, and just getting more intentional about that. We saw growth at every grade level. We didn't see the dramatic growth that we were seeing at the younger grades, but I think that will change over time.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's not just our district, but national trends that those numbers continue to decline as students go through an educational system. And it's kind of counterintuitive. You know, the more education they get, you would think they're improving and growing. So I have full confidence that Everett's going to be on that track soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other students, any questions? Okay, I guess, thank you for your question, because that was exactly what I had written down. But Dr. Matthews, for the students that, I'm sure you have numbers, but the 3+ undergrade, is that a small number of students or perception-wise? Because we had, percent growth, percent change, but is it 100 kids went 56% above, or is it 12 kids went 56% above?
Well, it depends on the grade level.
Okay.
And so on slide,
Write down the slide.
slide 10, those are the students in the dark red, right? So it's a small,
Okay,
it's a 4% of grade 3 students who are included in this data set.
okay.
So you know how much I hate estimating, but I'm just going to say, if you have 1,500 kids in a class, right, that's 4% is a relatively small number of students,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it is, and then it's 56%, say, of whichever one it was, of those 4%. So it is a really small number and a great number that are getting better.
Yes,
Okay,
that is an accurate statement.
yeah, and then for our two lovely principals, that you mentioned the bringing, the parents get a report, but now with the one-on-one technology, and I know we don't always send the technology home with kids, but how do we engage the families in sort of their role in this, that it isn't all on the schools, how they can help when they are able to help with some of that maybe some of the lessons at home, not the diagnostic, but the lessons, increasing reading, increasing math. How do you engage your parents?
Well, I think one of the ways is communicating. We communicate and communicate clearly, but it's also at our intermediate grades, we do send our devices home. And then we don't have the surplus that we had at the beginning of the pandemic, but we do try to fulfill needs. I received an email from a teacher who a family reached out, and ML, and said, can we have a Chromebook for at home so they could do that? Well, we work hard to meet those needs, those individual needs. Not all families are there. Kids are busy, lives are busy, but we want to be there, and we want to always put that out and communicate that to families, to let them know that this is an option, this is what you can do, ways to support, and what can we do to help you in that process.
So it's an offer. I mean, I know that every family is different, but it's like, if they knew how to, if they wanted to, we have you're able to provide them with what they might need. So that's
Yes.
lovely.
And if I don't have it, because I don't have the surplus I used to, but if I don't have it, then I have a tech person and I email Timmy.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I appreciate this, so thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
So we will move on to section 12.02, dual credit program update. And Dr. Bowden, I think you're introducing this.
Good evening, President Mitchell, Board of Directors, Dr. Salzman. I'm excited to have Dr. Jeannie Willard come to the podium tonight to share with you the dual credit presentation, to share our progress and update you on our status with all of our dual credit programs. Dr. Willard?
All right, I can't, did you share it? You did not share the screen. Hold on, I got it. I got it. Yeah. Okay, that took me a moment. All right. Good evening, Dr. Saltzman, President Mitchell, Board of Directors, student representatives. I'm really glad to be here this evening to share with you an update of our dual credit program, which is many programs that we offer in our high schools. So this evening, be able to share a description of each of those 4 programs, report out on the dual credit completion and participation rates, describe the 4 programs, which are advanced placement, college in the high school, career and technical education, which we refer to as CTE, dual credit, and running start programs and completion rates. With that, we're really focusing in on our priority student outcomes around reducing gaps in achievement between groups of students, and also ensuring that all of our students are prepared to succeed in college and career. So just a high level for dual credit programs is that there are 3 general ways that we offer dual credit programs. That's a mouthful. And those 3 ways start with passing a college course. And those are our college and the high school classes. Those are college classes that take place at our high schools as part of a high school course. We also have Running Start available to students as well. That's when students go to a campus, a college campus, or participate in their online learning and take the classes directly through a college. The next option is through an exam, and there are several of them out there, but we participate in advanced placement. So when students earn that 3, 4, or 5 on an AP exam, they are eligible, depending upon which college or university they attend, to earn college credit based on that score. And lastly, there's credit by articulation, which is our CTE dual credit program, which is really saying that we have an agreement with a college, Everett Community College in particular, which is going to show up throughout this presentation. And in that agreement, it says that the courses that they offer at the college and the course that's being offered at the high school have the same outcomes. And so by nature of that, we've agreed that college credit will also be issued. There are a lot of benefits when it comes to dual credit programs. I think the first one that comes to mind is really about the financial savings, the cost savings to family. By earning college credit early, you're really getting a jump start on your post-secondary credential. And that can happen in lots of different venues, as you know, the 4 programs, but all of them also have many different venues for that to occur as well. Another is to ease the transition between high school and any of the post-secondary options. So when a student is successful in one of those 4 programs, it allows them to see the level of rigor and be successful, be motivated to the next point, to be able to achieve their goals. And finally, it's another way that we offer students an option to explore their future interests. So alongside all of the different pathways and courses that we offer, what we see is that when students engage in classes that are also college classes, it allows them to see it in a different way and make some choices about their future. Another great option, and reminds me of a presentation that will come up very soon, which is about graduation, which is around the corner. So one of the pieces to students graduating is really that they complete their graduation pathways. In there are many options for students, but two in particular, and there's others that overlap in different ways, allow students to fulfill their graduation pathways, specifically around advanced placement courses in specific English or math courses, allows a student to be able to finish their graduation pathway. So that could be through taking the class and getting a C+ or higher, or earning that 3, 4, or 5 we talk about when we talk about advanced placement. The other option is actually labeled dual credit, and for us that's around college and the high school, CTE dual credit and Running Start. Students who participate in English or math classes that fulfill one of those dual enrollment options, and it's at the 100 level or higher at the college, it allows them to meet their graduation pathway option in that way. So the next few slides, I'll share a little bit of the overview data that goes along with the patterns of our dual credit course completion rate patterns. So if we look back at the last 7 years, what you'll see is that our district has a dual credit course completion rate about 4% higher than the states. And you'll also notice that in 2 years in particular, we really ramped up. And that was really the result, you'll see, of College Spark, which we were part of a grant that was offered. And what it did is it allowed us to invest in students before college and the high school was free, before we had some other options for scholarships. We had the College Spark grant, which allowed us to pay for scholarships for AP, allowed us to be able to subsidize some of that tuition that otherwise wasn't available really previously. All of this is fairly new, that we're experiencing many more options for students to get that credit without paying. So that was a period of time, and it allowed us to do a lot of support for students. And so that was a 3-year grant, and you can largely see that it culminates in 18, but we see the lingering effects. And many other opportunities came available around that time that allowed students to really participate and take the risk of actually earning the credit. They wanted to be in there, and there were opportunities for all students to have it paid for. We're going to focus most of this presentation on the 22-23 school year, which is the last comprehensive school year we have for this data. What you'll also notice if you were to go back into the other years is we see similar patterns. So this is a really good year to highlight because similar patterns of participation really happen in the years previous. So with that, what you'll see is about half of our students participate in college and the high school in that year, about a third in our advanced placement, about 20%, you'll see a little higher for CTE dual credit, and a much lower rate for Running Start, but there's many reasons behind that as well. Just to take another global look, what you'll see is that if you look at our graduates, just overall to get a sense of how much they're participating every year for many of them. And by the time they graduate, what you'll see is over 95% of them have completed a dual credit course. That could be multiples, that could be one. So it just depends on the student because there are different paths for different students. So I'm going to share a little bit about each program just to give you some highlights of each of the areas. So for advanced placement, it's a College Board program. We talk about this course because it's aligned across all of the places that offer AP courses. The other great piece to it is the alignment of the exam. All students who take AP classes, whether it's in this district, across the state, across the country, across the world, because they're national or international, can earn scores of 3, 4, or 5. And typically that will earn some level of college credit when they choose to go on. It does have a fee attached to it. It's $98 for that exam and a little higher at $128 for AP Seminar and AP Research. There are fee waivers for students who qualify. Our AP program is unique because there's lots of pieces and tentacles that hang off of it. But just to highlight a few of the key pieces, we made a switch probably about 8 years ago to pre-AP. So all of our English 1 and English 2 classes are pre-AP English 1 and 2. And what that allows for all of our students is that they have access to the skills, the content, the ways of thinking, the analysis that takes place in AP classes, students have access to when they start high school. And for some of our students, if they take pre-AP English 1 in 8th grade, it's also there as well. When we go on, there's 29 courses available that are advanced placement in our high schools. They cover 7 different content areas, so we have a wide range of courses. And then finally, the culmination if students choose to take AP classes to that extent is our AP Capstone Diploma program, which is offered for students who have 4 AP exam scores of 3, 4, or 5, imagine the workload, plus AP seminar and AP research scores of 3, 4, or 5. So this is a big lift. We have lots of kids that participate in AP, but to have accomplished all of that is monumental. So with that, for the class that graduated last year, the class of 2023, we had 21 students who earned that AP Capstone Diploma. Some other pieces to our advanced placement support are that we send each year about 15 teachers to our AP readings across the country, and many of them are online as well right now. It's one of the best professional learning opportunities our teachers can participate in. They actually see the exams up close with student responses, and they take away learnings from having scored many, many thousands perhaps of exams depending upon the area and bring it back to their learning with other teachers and then also their practice with students. In addition, we offer, this is our 8th year, the AP Summer Institute. It started off in person, and then since the pandemic has gone online with a great deal of participation, not just within our district, but we have outside participants that join us for that event as well. In August, it'll be August 12th. We have 10 sessions this year. We've actually grown. It was 8 for quite a few years. We added AP Spanish language, which we've had great growth in, and AP Psychology as well. And then finally, we've had a partnership with Equal Opportunity Schools for the last 10 years. And they're an organization that really helps us with our outreach, our recruitment, and support of students who join us for AP classes. It also helps us with progress monitoring. We pull data, we review students and how they're doing in our AP classes. We also support teachers through our Equity Learning Labs, which allows us to look at the data, but also our practices to support students. With that, we'll move to college and the high school, which has been a lot in the news over the last year. Senate Bill 5048 that was passed last year really was a game changer because now there's no tuition for college and the high school. The only other option similar to this previously was Running Start, and you had to leave the campus. So this really changed what students had access to in our high schools. So students earn college and high school credit for the very same class. They have the option, though, as to whether they're going to sign up and register for that college credit. But there's no cost for the tuition, and that's been a great changer. College and the high school, we have quite a few courses. We have over 50 courses that are offered, most of which are through Everett Community College, which I highlighted was going to show up on many slides and beyond the slide. We have 42 different courses and 82 teachers just through Everett Community College. Another set of courses through UW and the high school, 7 there with 16 teachers. And then Edmonds College, we have a smaller interagency agreement where we have 2 courses and 4 teachers. I wanted to note because there's a lot of mention here. There's a lot of overlap for lots of things that take place in dual enrollment options. And one of them is really around our AP and our college and the high school courses, where 19 of those AP courses, if you remember there were 29, are actually also college and the high school. So students who are participating are showing up in both rates. With that, CTE dual credit. So this was the program that's really based on having shared outcomes between a college course and one of our high school courses. They're generally technical in nature. Students end the course with an industry recognized credential. And it comes at no cost for students to participate. So similar to the other program, college and the high school, except that our district does pay an administrative fee in order for students to participate. So that is a piece of the puzzle, but that allows our students to access it. There are 11 CTE dual credits. Again, Everett Community College is our provider for that. It's really at the crossroads of academics and technical in nature, each of these courses. There's lots of great choices. They actually range many different areas. You can see that many of them are very technical in nature. But one of them is very pervasive in our district. It's the College and Career Readiness Seminar. That is the course that all of our students are required to take in order to graduate from Everett Public Schools. And so that's an added feature that took many years of collaboration to align that work so that it was offered for all students, so that we knew that every student could leave with college credit if they chose that. And Running Start. So looking at Running Start, there's also been a lot of news around Running Start and changes there. That could be a whole other presentation. But Running Start is available to our 11th and 12th grade students. That's why when you look at the data, it's going to be NA for 9th and 10th grade. And then you'll see higher numbers at the junior and senior years. Students enroll and attend college courses. Some of them are online, so some students actually participate very much not on a campus, but through the college directly. Students and families do not pay tuition, but they do pay for fees and other things, books that are related to the course as well. If they are signed up for a Running Start class, it goes on their permanent college transcript. So in the other opportunities, students have an option to choose to have the courses added to their college transcript, but this is different for Running Start. So with that, our Running Start enrollment, because it's a little bit different, wanted to highlight that we have about 2/3 of our students who participate are actually participating part-time. So 1-2 classes, that's generally the pattern. But we do have another third of students who participate full-time. So that accounts for the students that are in other slides and other data. And with that, we also see Everett Community College as our largest provider. So not quite 2/3, but generally in that range. And then to a lesser degree, Cascadia and Edmonds are where students also arrive. And then we have much smaller programs, but students really have access to the state's full programming for Running Start if they choose that. And so for each of the other colleges, what you'll see is 1 to 2 students that are participating in each of those. And some of them are definitely statewide programs, and students access them from here. We're going to take a little closer look at some of the dual credit course completion rates by gender, race and ethnicity, grade, and so forth. So to take a closer look at what we heard about and what that means in terms of our completion rate. So if you look here, this is by grade level. As expected, you see increased participation in 11th and 12th grades, where not only Running Start, where you can't have that, of course, in 9th and 10th grade, but just overall the courses that are offered also have that range of opportunity. So it goes up from 9th through 12th grade, except for advanced placement, where you see a highlight in 10th grade, where the highest is really there. And that really accounts for our AP World History and our AP Seminar classes, where we have very high enrollments in those classes overall, and students are taking them the preponderance of that in 10th grade. There are other courses that have higher enrollment, but the distribution across grade levels doesn't highlight one grade level. So kind of interesting there, I guess, if you're looking at a lot of data. Let's take a look at race and ethnicity. So a pattern here is that you will see that we generally have similar rates of participation, but higher for our Asian students, especially in the areas of our advanced placement and our college and the high school. A little bit lower for our Asian students in terms of participation in CTE dual credit. And for our Hispanic students, you see slightly lower rates, but a slightly higher rate when it comes to our CTE dual credit. You're going to see rates throughout most of these slides where CTE dual credit seems to be a similar rate no matter how you break apart the data. So very common, and there are many classes, not just College and Career Readiness Seminar, many classes in there that many of our students are taking to access career fields, explore their interests, and so forth. So with that, if we look by gender, female students are participating at a slightly higher rate, and our non-binary students at a slightly lower rate than other two groups of gender groups. And then if we break the data apart by programs, what you'll see here, and just so that you didn't have to look back at other slides, we have all students here, is that we have much lower participation rates in dual credit for our students in the multi-learner program and for students with disabilities, especially in the areas of advanced placement and college and the high school. What you would also see is that for our students who are qualifying for free and reduced meals, that the rates aren't quite as low, that the rate for advanced placement and for college and the high school are about 10% lower than they are for our all students group for the average. But what you'll see persistently is CTE dual credit. You see all students really represented in that data. And then because the numbers for Running Start were so small, that is why we have suppressed data for our ML and for our students with disabilities. So with that, dual credit really provides options for early college experiences throughout. There is that added cost savings benefit for students, no matter the program they participate in. There is continued emphasis on equitable access for all of our students. Dual credit is really another way for students to really think about their high school and beyond planning. What is their post-secondary plan? And so exploring their future interests is a key piece to this as well. And then finally, having the right dual credit for each student. Each option matters in terms of which student we're talking about and what their real interests and what their goals are for the future. So with that, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments?
I have one question. I think it's on page 8. If you could just help me understand the numbers at
Yes.
the top of the bars.
Yes.
Those are number of students in AP, but those students could also be in college and the high school,
That's right.
They're
That's
not-
exactly right.
They're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, they're not unique.
And then the 34%, what is that telling me?
The 34% of students in the 22-23 school year participated in an advanced placement course in high school.
I got it. 34% of high schoolers
Yes.
last year
9th through 12th
took an
grade.
AP class.
That's right.
Okay, got
And
it.
you can
Thank
extend that to any of the bars in the same way.
And again, same thing on the percentage, it's not mutually exclusive.
That's
You can-
right. So
you can
students that are showing up in
participate more than one
AP
category.
are going to, because we saw the slide, are going to show up also in college and the high school. So by the nature of it, a large percentage of those students are already in the other column as well.
And to follow on that question,
Yeah.
which just prompted my thinking there. So students are double counted in like AP in college and high school because you can get either, but typically they only take one, don't they?
Typically, they make a choice.
Yeah.
There are some classes, there's cultures of every class, every school. There are some places where students take the AP exam because that is what the teacher really wants from the class and students are behind that. And they may also sign up for the credit because if you sign up for the credit, you know you've got the credit, where you're taking a different kind of chance when you sign up for the exam.
And do we, I know there's been some discussion previously, do we track that data? Because it's interesting to find out which ones prefer the college and the high school credit versus an AP exam, because our exam, our number of students don't always take
That's
the
right.
number of exams that are offered.
We track really closely our AP exam taking. In fact, one of the attachments to tonight's presentation is Dr. Matthews' report around AP exam taking. For college and the high school or any of the college courses, it's much harder to track that
Okay.
because students sign up for that credit directly with the college. We do have agreements and we do occasionally do polls and analyze that data, but it is an option available to them. So we don't have it at our fingertips the way we do
Right.
around AP.
And that's a
Yeah.
great segue, because my other
Yeah.
question or maybe comment was, I noticed, I did read through that AP report, and the number of AP students is down from several years ago. And my first question was, are we working with equal opportunity schools still? And the answer is yes. Do we have the same kind of contract, same kind of involvement as we
We
did?
do, and we're slowly seeing increases again.
Yeah, and, but at the same time, there's been more options offered. So,
Yes.
to me, the fact that AP has lost some interest over other dual credit options is, just, it's choice, student choice.
That's right.
That's not a bad thing. And the other good news is that I noticed that qualifying AP scores are up across the board. So that's a big win. So the kids that are taking AP exams are doing a little bit better.
Yep, they're
So,
supported.
yeah.
We put things in place, so we
Yeah.
continue to do that.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
A question I had around, especially, I guess, just AP and running start, is anecdotally, when I was in high school, I found a huge world of difference between doing an AP World History class and then doing US History, a non-AP class the year after. And it's just, ever since then, I've been greatly concerned by, I guess, for lack of a better term, the brain drain we might experience in some of these classrooms where you're taking the top 10, 20% of students who might be interested in AP or Running Start or some other program and wind up going and doing those amazing things that are really great for them personally. But I'm just fearful how that's playing out in a lot of these classrooms, and just wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, I think the complement to some of the balance that we're seeing is really around the growth of our college and the high school classes. So we have more staff really signing up, which means that they meet the college's requirements. So even if students aren't in AP, the offerings for college and the high school are much more diversified than they've ever been. Students still will cap out on how many classes they can take, but our English 4 class, for example, which is not AP, is entirely college and the high school. So students who are in those classes, who come from every background and maybe in lots of different courses along the pathways that they arrive there, are all receiving the same college and the high school level rigor. So there are places where we've grown that, and we work with teachers because it's really their choice to be able to participate or not, because they have to adhere to the syllabus requirements, their own teaching qualifications. They have to match the colleges. They already meet ours. And they help us by doing those steps so that we get an entire grade level of a course. So any student, no matter, has that opportunity. So we continue to work on it. It's something we definitely watch for, but we continue to make sure that that's happening as much as we can.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
A lot of interesting data in there. It was really fun to go through, actually. One of the things was it looked like exams varies between subjects, 1 to 327.
Yeah.
So curious, the 327, is that environmental science? Is that, which class is that?
Well, she's not here, and I don't have it in front of me. AP Environmental Science is a large one. AP World History is another large one. So I would have to look back at the exact, because I don't have it right in front of me. I'm sorry, I didn't study up on that to have it at my fingertips.
I was curious because I know that's a big one, and yet nationally, the environmental science is not one of the top 10 that the College Board is requested.
Yes.
And so I just thought it was an interesting regional difference, I think. And then curious how one exam, what does that look like? Is that one student taking an exam in another class? How do we?
We have them tested in their own room because there's requirements by College Board around how testing takes place.
And that's just another class, and just one student happened to sign up?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, very interesting on that.
It is not the norm.
Also, on the summary slide, you had put there, trying to find the best fit. Do we monitor, are there courses that, is it an issue that students sign up and then a couple weeks into it, oh, can't do this, it's too hard, and then the dropout? Is that something that's monitored if there's excitement over, all my friends are signing up for AP?
Actually, we do. This has been a lot of work with our counselors over the last 10 years. I want to say when we first started the work with Equal Opportunity Schools, which has really been our support network also around our growth of advanced placement, but really any of our rigorous courses, initially the concern was that students would withdraw, and there were a lot of rules at each school about you have to commit, you need to stick with it. We did away with a lot of those rules because we wanted students and families to make that choice. But what has happened as a result is that we really put a lot of support, so the counter piece to it. If a student really wanted to leave the class, we would work with them, but we do not see an exodus that happens shortly in. We do a lot of pre-work. Right now, registration is taking place. I was over at North today talking about a student, and they have some plans for a few years from now that include advanced placement. And you could hear some of the interest and concern about so many classes and how it might be overwhelming. So we know we're still having those conversations all the time with every grade level, but we do not see kids leave largely. They almost entirely stay. And we just help make the best choices, and also that AP or any of these are really for all students. And we're going to help support kids when they're in there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Students have any questions? I just have a big thank you personally, because all the work you have done through all the years, except for the pandemic, on graduation. So my daughter will graduate on time in May.
Woohoo!
And it was last fall or last spring where it was looking at her transcript and saying, you need to bring up some of that college and the high school or AP. So she has not had any electives because they fall in elective.
That's
But
excellent.
it cost me, $65 for Spanish 3 college and the high school. It cost $98 for this AP.
Wow.
And I saved literally tens of thousands. So that is just a huge thank you, huge.
Yeah,
from
imagine
my
some of our
pocketbook.
students right now who aren't even paying that. So
Exactly.
what an advantage. I'm really glad to hear
It's a huge
that.
advantage because you never know, I've said this for years, when your life is going to go sideways, coming out of a pandemic, starting college virtual, it is just sort of the benefit we can give our students to get a leg up, to be that more ahead. And Director Atkins, for your question, I do hear tell in schools about AP and then general ed. So I do appreciate that feeling. But I do think that, like you said, a lot of the teachers are being taught to teach at a higher level. So it's not a less than class. It really is the appropriate class being taught at the highest level. And, but again, it's feeling, it's perception. And, there is some truth, but we're doing better, if that helps.
Yeah, and part of my question wasn't necessarily around the teacher's instruction, but more so about how the
composition
kids
of
are
the class.
interacting with each other in the classroom. Because when I was in an AP class, I was getting engaged in the coursework, and I was very participatory in class. But then when I moved over to a regular classroom, I found that I just didn't have nearly the same level of interest. And I kind of skated by more. And so I guess my concern was more so about, like, if we're taking these kids that are real go-getters and do a lot of that independent individual work and are fascinated about these subjects, and then going and then pursuing these other classes that are very good for them personally and their own growth, how is that negatively affecting their peers in those classrooms, where maybe you have some students who, if there were other students who were helping them kind of succeed and be higher achieving than they otherwise would be, but then you don't have those high achieving students there to, I don't want to call them lazy, because I mean, at the end of the day, I was kind of lazy. And I guess what I'm speaking more to is the expectation of the students in those classes. And it just felt like there was a very different expectation in AP or honors courses than in other classrooms. And it felt like students were more able to kind of rise to the challenge in those AP and honors courses. And I know a lot of that is self-selection and whatnot, but just, sorry, I have a lot of thoughts on that.
Well, and that's what it is. I think those are the challenges of public school. So, I mean, they're good discussions to have, because it makes us better. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, section 13.0, information discussion. Ms. Tress, you have 2 subjects for us tonight. So we'll begin with the budget development update.
Thank you, President Mitchell, Dr. Saltzman, Board of Directors. Tonight, I will be providing an update on the budget development process for the 24-25 fiscal year. I'll walk through our budget development life cycle and timeline, the impact of the legislative outcomes, and how these updates will update our fiscal outlook, and the next steps and process for the budget development. Annually, the district has a cyclical process for developing the budget, culminating in the 2 readings of the budget that is presented to the board. The first reading held in July, and the second reading, our hearing adoption, held in August of this year. This slide highlights the major annual processes for the districts. As I mentioned, the board will review the budget document and adopt the total expenditure capacity in the summer timeframe. The district evaluates actual enrollment and aligns its staffing at the beginning of the school year. Next, the district updates its projections based on the actual enrollment in the winter timeframe. In winter and spring, we're evaluating budget parameters and getting feedback from our community and guidance from our fiscal advisory council process. And all of that information is ultimately incorporated in the state budget document and then presented back to the board in that spring-summer timeframe. What I want to highlight are some key dates in our budget development process overall. So in January, we're receiving our enrollment information from our consultant, and then internally we do an analysis around that enrollment and look to building staffing allocations overall. This year, we held many community engagement meetings, looking at a reduction of a little around 1% overall of our total budget. Within that, we monitor our legislative outcomes. This year, we had a shorter session in the state legislative biennium is a second year, and so it's a shorter session overall, and we've been actively involved and engaging in that legislative session. Today, we are holding the budget development update to provide this information to the board and where we're at. So what we're doing now going forward is integrating all of those legislative outcomes. We're receiving back our staffing allocation information and building and balancing that budget. What the board will see is in the May timeframe, you'll be presented with our student presentations for our ASB budget presentations, and it's one of my favorite meetings, and I know it's one of the boards. They get very excited to see those high school students present to you all. And ultimately, we'll bring that to you in July, on July 2nd, for the first reading operating budget overall. As I mentioned previously, one of the things we monitor throughout this budget process is our legislative outcomes. So I'm just going to highlight that calendar. I did also mention it was a shorter session, so our state has a 2-year biennium budget process, and the shorter session tends to not have as many increase in funding overall through that session. It's a 60-day session that started in January and ended March 7th. There was a significant amount of activity overall. There was over 1,200 bills introduced during this session, and 399 bills were adopted. So I want to talk a little about the impacts of that session and on the financial impacts specifically that we are looking for this year and next year, And so one of the impacts was around our material, supplies, and operating cost allocations, and I'm going to refer to them as MSOCs through this presentation. So we did receive an increase in funding of approximately $21 per student, and one of the unique things is that this impacted this fiscal year, and so they backdated that impact to this fiscal year, and we estimate that we will see an approximate increase of $500,000 overall. I do want to highlight that this increase is great. However, it doesn't fully fund the additional costs we've been receiving year over year in our MSOCs for our utilities and insurance and those type of activities overall. And so it is a move in the right direction, but we still have a gap overall when it comes to our increase in MSOCs from year over year. In addition, we had some updates to our prototypical staffing model. So they increased our staffing allocations for our paraeducator, office support, and non-instructional aides. And again, this impacted this fiscal year. So we estimate that impact to be approximately $600,000 in funding for this fiscal year. And really the intent of this fund is to help support districts in not having to reduce as many classified staff going forward, as well as maintaining staffing levels or possibly providing state increases. I also want to highlight that we as a district overall already staff above the prototypical funding model when it comes to classified staff and cost as well. And so this is a move in the right direction, but it's a move in the right direction, but we're hopeful in the future that we'll get additional supports around that. IPD, or the implicit price deflator, is also been finalized and determined overall, and we were projecting 3.9% based on last year's biennium for the state legislature. It has slightly decreased to 3.7% overall. What I want to say to that is that allocation increases our overall funding by approximately 3.7%. And what that means is to maintain the level of staffing maintain their current level of staffing based on our enrollment, we do anticipate about a $2.6 million increase in staffing cost above the state funding. Ultimately, because all of our staff are already funded above the prototypical model overall. So how does that impact our fiscal outlook? So I'm going to change the page on my notes. So it does update our overall projections for this fiscal year. In January, I was projecting about 8.2%, and in our previous meeting, we were projecting 7.8% when you saw us at the board budget workshop. We are seeing an increase overall, and there are many factors impacting this, and one of them is the increase in funding the legislature provided. There are some factors, including special ed enrollment, as well as our transitional services provided to our multi-language learners. That enrollment we're seeing high overall, but the major impact as we look forward going forward is that we believe the overall reductions we need to make for this fiscal year for next fiscal year are significantly we were projecting 1%, but we're looking at more like 0.25% overall. And going forward, that means we're managing our expenditures. So when you look at a 1% change of our expenditures above or below our revenues, it's kind of where you want to target and where you're looking forward to managing your expenditures. And that's what we'll see going forward in our projection years, being within that 1% range of our total fund balance. We will see some ups and downs in regards to our total expenditures above our revenues, primarily due to some of our one-time cost plans for our long-term planning for our curriculum adoptions as well. And so that's one of the impacts overall. What has been updated in these projections is IPD for the 24-25 fiscal year. We're still finalizing some things as we go through the budget development process on IPD for the future years. By the time we were preparing those presentations, we didn't have the final data of what those projections will look like. Again, benefit assumptions have also been updated, and we have updated all of our enrollment assumptions based on based on the median projection that was provided by our consultant in the January timeframe. So next steps. The next steps in our budget development and process include integrating all those staffing allegations we provided to the schools, integrating the final legislative outcomes and evaluating our costs and revenues. Again, as I mentioned, the board presentations for the high school students, ASB budget presentations, and developing the budgets for all other funds, which include our capital fund, our debt service fund, and our transportation funds. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Ms. Tress, on page 7, you said approximately 2.6 million increase in staffing cost above state funding. You're talking about next year?
For next
like that's our
year,
assumption?
yeah.
Do you know what that is this year? And if you don't, if you want to get back to it, that's okay, but I was just curious, see how that's changing.
What's the difference between the two? I don't know the answer to that, and I think it really is dependent on IPD. And so as that increases or decreases, the amount above or below is based on what that looks like. And so it really does depend on what they project the cost of living adjustment overall to be.
Yeah, thanks. I was just more trying to figure out if I should celebrate or if I should be sad.
This is a win based on our prior year projections. It's in a better than the previous because IPD, as it gets smaller, the impact to our above and beyond the state funding does get smaller as well.
And if you want to look at really how much of our salaries do come out of the local levies, it still is very high.
Yeah.
So even post-McCleary. So it is this, we do staff all of our schools a lot higher than the state
Oh, yeah,
recommends.
yeah.
And so that's really where we need the support of the local community. Any other questions or comments?
I had a quick one. We're not going to see any additional funding from special education from the 15 to 16, because we're at about 12, is that correct?
Are we talking about the prototypical model, or are we talking, so what's been incorporated in the budget projections is those increase in, oh, you're talking about the cap.
Yeah, sorry.
No, we won't
Yeah.
be, so our cap is, we are just under 13% in our overall
Okay, so
enrollment.
12 something, yeah, that's what I thought.
And so that doesn't impact us financially in the next fiscal year, or we don't anticipate it to. However, what it does mean for us is that we will have access to that fund if our enrollment continues to grow as an overall. So there is at least a 3% window now of our total enrollment that if there is a need for that based on how our student services are needed, we will have the capacity for that.
Okay, and then I was just curious, I know it's way too early, but do you anticipate any increase to our busing service? Are you having
So not for
conversations
next
because of the benefits?
We do in the future years. So ultimately, the change in there is a bill that was adopted that requires districts contracting out services to provide benefits
Right.
comparable to the comparable to what we provide as a state, which we're preliminary estimating about $500,000 to $1 million annually. That one thing about that is that it doesn't have to happen until you renegotiate your contract, which is in a future year. And the other thing that really helps us too is that it is really based on the current funding model, and because we primarily receive our prior year expenditures as our next year revenues, it's a 1-year gap. And so, I mean, as things change, if things change in the funding model, that would change that perception. But right now it is
Right.
about, I believe in 2027 is when we will be renegotiating that contract.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
Questions or comments? Students, any questions?
I just want to say a comment again, that thank you to the district staff for really facing the budget last year, the cuts that put us in this is a really nice situation to be in compared to what we were thinking we were even going to be facing, so.
Just to add to that, we did the hard work last year, and the big piece of the work last year, and really with the support of Dr. Saltzman and really all of the people in the room and just the whole district, because it was impactful overall. And so that really puts us in a better place as we move forward and looking at just how we manage our expenditures within that, trying to be within that 1% range of our fund percent balance.
Thank you. So now we'll move on to your next presentation, which is the second quarter financial reports.
Okay. I might need help switching.
Hit escape, yep.
Okay, thank you. I don't want to.
Like on your PowerPoint,
Oh,
hit
there it is.
escape. Yeah.
All right. Well, once again, thank you, President Mitchell, Dr. Saltzman, Board of Directors. Tonight, I will be going over the second quarter financial report. If it would change slides for me. I will review our general fund, the district's major operating fund, its enrollment, revenues, expenditures, and fund balance. I will also go over the other 4 comprehensive fund, which include our capital projects funds, our debt service fund, our associated student body fund, or transportation vehicle fund. So first, looking at the district's enrollment. This table represents the student's annual average enrollment or a full-time equivalent. And the annual average student FTE or enrollment is really an average of our monthly enrollment overall, which differs from what we typically talk to around student headcount, which is the number of students that are in the school on that count day. But why I like to highlight the annual average student enrollment is it's really the primary driver of the district revenues overall. We do anticipate our enrollment to follow prior year trends. However, we are seeing an update in our special education enrollment and our transitional bilingual instruction program enrollment, or TBIP as we call it from the funding perspective, or you may recognize it as the enrollment around student services for multi-language learners. So we have seen increases there overall. This enrollment projection is higher than our budget, higher than our budget, but is kind of maintained flat from our projections going forward outside of the updates to special education enrollment and our TBIP enrollment. As we move towards looking at our projected revenues, this table, let me change the slide. This table represents the 3-year monthly trends for our revenues overall. We are anticipating an increase in our revenues from January of approximately $2.7 million. That increase is primarily due to an increase in our state funding related to the legislative impacts I previously discussed in the budget development process of about $1.1 million. We're also anticipating an increase in our special purpose revenues related to our safety net application for this funding supports high cost related to special education services. Our grant was approximately significantly increased, and we applied for a grant for approximately $5.8 million, where we're anticipating a $1.1 million increase. And then that remaining difference, not noted on the slide, really relates to other smaller amounts overall for revenue increases. We are seeing an increase in our food and nutrition participation, which is driving some of this, and some of our enrollment related to our special education updates and our enrollment related to students receiving multi-language learning services. Moving on to projected expenditures. Expenditures are projected to be within board approved authorized appropriations for approximately $386.5 million. We are anticipating a slight decrease in expenditures from January projections. Our material supplies and operating costs, or our MSOCs, are anticipated to be higher than budget, and our projections did increase approximately $100,000 from January to this year. And we're seeing a trend, a higher than normal trend, a higher trend of spending from last year. For example, this year, we're spending about $2.1 million higher than we did at this year at last time, and what's driving some of the minor changes in increasing our MSOCs. We are anticipating a slight decreasing in staffing expenditures, and we have been projecting them to be lower than budget overall. And that decrease from January was approximately $300,000, and that's based on what we're experiencing and seeing in our staffing cost overall. These expenditures do reflect one of our collective bargaining agreements that was approved in January, and then the other collective bargaining agreement will be reflected in the March timeframe with the staff cost increases. When we look at the monthly trend table here for the 3 years, the blue line with the dot kind of fluctuates in and out, and that's really driven by the number of weeks we have the opportunity to make payments during the month. So sometimes some months are 4 weeks and some are 5 weeks, and so that can drive some changes in the patterns overall, and those aren't consistent year over year. We did see an uptick in February too in our staffing costs related to the paying the collective bargaining agreement staffing increases, however. So what that means for fund balance is that we are increasing our expected ending fund balance to 8.9 from 8.2%. So our percentage of expenditures to our fund balance will increase from our projections from January. Again, as we talked about, That increase is driven by our legislative outcomes. And the overall impact to special education is projected to decline. We budgeted about $8.6 million in local funding for our special education program, and we're expecting that to decline to about $8 million overall. We are also assuming, we are projecting the use of carryover for our food and nutrition program as well. We anticipated to spend more down in their carryover from prior years, and so we anticipate a $0.8 million benefit to our fund balance as well. Our ending fund balance overall for February is $30.3 million, but we do anticipate to be about $34.8 million towards the end of August. The fund balance is following typical trends as well, seeing that high point in October, and we'll see probably another high point in April due to the timing of when we receive our levy revenues. As we move to our other funds, our 4 other comprehensive funds, I'll review the capital project funds first. Our February ending fund balance is approximately $38.3 million. The capital fund supports major capital and technology projects, which include replacements and modernizations of new buildings, one-to-one device lifecycle management, building upgrades, and roofing projects. The capital fund revenues have shifted from a mix of levy revenues and bond proceeds to primarily being funded through our levy overall. So we'll start to see a fund balance trending shift in this monthly table, as we'll see a jump in October and that jump in that April timeframe too. The capital fund expenditures fluctuate based on the timing of projects throughout the year. We'll possibly see slightly increasing fund balance due to buildup of funds to support the school modernizations and school replacements that are in the plan overall. We will ensure that we have enough fund balance to complete the project based on anticipated timeline overall within that fund. Annually, the capital fund transfers funds from the capital fund to the general fund for activities that are considered capital fund eligible, but are required to be paid through the general fund. And this year we transferred $4.5 million. Our debt service fund supports the principal and interest payments of the district's outstanding bonds. Currently, we have approximately $71.4 million in outstanding bonds remaining. And similarly to the general fund, you'll see that uptick in the October and an uptick in our fund balance trend, and then April timeframe as this our primary revenue sources through our levies overall. You see that bigger swing in the October-November timeframe and that bigger decline in December because our actual principal payment occurs in December, principal and interest occurs in December, and when we pay our bonds in June, it's interest only, and so there's a timing shift of the payments overall. Again, this fund has sufficient funds to support our remaining principal and interest overall for our fund for the outstanding debt. The Associated Student Body Fund supports student activities. And as I've mentioned in the past, typically fall is generally the high point due to ASB card sales, yearbook sales, and other fundraisers that happen at the beginning of the school year. We are seeing an uptick this month in February of their fund balance, and I had to dig into this to understand the why. And it's really driven by the fact there are some overnight trips coming up that they're fundraising for at this time of year that will be spent down at later points in time. Our transportation vehicle fund supports the purchases of buses and school bus infrastructure, and that ending fund balance is $223,000. We do have capacity to purchase buses. However, we will not be purchasing buses this school year, and we have a plan to purchase some and receive some of those buses at the beginning of the school year overall. Under the contracted busing model, all of our other state transportation funding goes through our general fund. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Of course.
Of course, Roman. Just a really quick one. Revenues went up. The projections went up, I would say, much more than expenditures, like 10 times, which is great. And a lot of that is on MSOC. And I hate to surprise Mr. Gunn, but I wonder, with that kind of a situation, do we need that money to transfer over next year by leaving it in the fund balance? Or are there opportunities to accelerate repairs and maintenance or widen the scope of things that are maybe in need of repairs and maintenance?
So those MSOC increases were for specifically utilities and insurance. And so I think depending on what you're looking at too, if the scope of the project is, and Mike Gunn could probably speak to this more specifically, but it may be a capital fund project versus something that we do in our maintenance. So maintenance is repairs, really repairs and maintenance only, where the capital fund supports major system changes. And so depending on what the need is and what, it will be dependent on what the focus would be and what fund and what resources we use on that specifically. I don't know if there's any other feedback to that.
Yeah, that's your question.
Not exactly. I mean, I guess, so general fund revenues, specifically for MSOC, which are utilities and insurance, I guess what I'm trying to get to is, and I know dollars aren't all fungible, right? You can't just spend them wherever you want, but when you have an increase in revenue like that, I wonder, what do we think about when we celebrate. I certainly hope we're celebrating, right? And what do we do? What can we do today? Or do we have to put it in the bank?
So I would recommend at this point to hold on to this as that we have some anticipated costs that we haven't, we've been, for example, curriculum adoptions is something we haven't been, we've been holding on to manage through the budget times. And so there's some significant increases we'll need in the future overall with that. And we are still projecting with maintaining our maintenance level, a somewhat declining fund balance overall, moderately speaking. And so I think depending on what the needs are, if there's specific needs at the school that are project-based, it might be capital eligible. But if there's a need within our, for a maintenance piece, we typically will do that work as well. If there's a replacement of a boiler and it's one specific one, we'll make sure we're replacing that activity with it when it's needed overall.
Okay, thank you.
Is it fair to say that those increases are sort of backfilling some of what we've already been providing?
Specifically, yes. So what the projected increases are kind of coming in a couple places. One is for special education. So we already support a significant amount of special education dollars overall. And so it does free up capacity in our local levy. And so we have choices of what we can do going forward. And then the other is for MSOC. But again, that doesn't fully support the amount of increase year over year that we have seen in related to those MSOC increases. For example, our insurance increased close to $1 million, and we're only getting an additional $500,000 in MSOCs this year, specifically for the new funding.
Okay, are you telling me that? Okay.
I'm just,
I'll take it, thank you.
The state's just catching up is what's happening for the costs that we're already incurring.
I get that.
Well, trying to catch up.
Yeah, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
So now we'll move on to section 14.0 unfinished business, and there is none for this meeting. Section 15.0 new business, there is none for this meeting. Section 16.0 upcoming agenda items. Dr. Saltzman, what is planned for us in the future?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Board of Directors and the public this evening. At the April 16th special meeting, Board of Directors will attend the Everett Community College Foundation event. On April 16th, we have a work study session. Board of Directors will engage in a professional learning update. At our regular meeting on April 23rd, 2024, that will contain the following: recognition for core value champions, diversity, recognition the Mayor's Arts Award winner, Board Goals 2023-24 progress review, communications and community engagement plan update, March financial report, capital facilities plan draft review for 2024 through 2029, a 5-year plan, Northwest Regional Learning Center agreement, Sonoma Discovery Program agreement, the Denny Detention and the Core Educational Program interlocal agreement, and board travel discussion. Thank you, Madam Chair and Board of Directors this evening.
Thank you. Now we move on to section 17.0, executive closed session. There is none for this meeting. Section 18.0, adjourn. This concludes the March 26, 2024 regular meeting of the Everett Public Schools Board of Directors. The meeting is now adjourned and wishing everyone a lovely spring break.